Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching India Tonight with me, Samita Karir, and my colleague Ashish Parikh. And tonight on the show, we put the spotlight on tech giant Amazon announcing that it will be laying off 14,000 of its corporate employees. This is the largest job cut since 2022 that the company has announced. In fact, the company said that this move is driven by an intent of AI restructuring. Amazon senior executive has said that there is a need to be organized more leanly with fewer layers and more ownership. Meanwhile, the company has also said that they will be supporting those impacted. Remember, this move brings to the forefront once again the issue of the impact of artificial intelligence on the tech world and what does it essentially, the rise of AI essentially means for the job market, the evolution of employee roles. Ashish, and that's what we are discussing on India Tonight.
Absolutely. It's a broad discussion that we're going to have today on the show. And remember that just a few weeks ago, artificial intelligence and automation could wipe out nearly 100 million jobs in the US over the next decade. Now, this is, of course, according to a report released by Senator Bernie Sanders. In fact, his analysis is what I'm talking about. And this analysis, ironically, was based on ChatGPT findings. And this found that new tech could erase jobs from a wide range of fields, including white and blue collar roles. We'll, of course, talk about this in details. But before we get into that, let's look at what Anjali Palod is getting us.
Right. Amazon has officially confirmed that 14,000 jobs will be affected in a latest round of layoffs from the company. The company has announced these job cuts in a blog post, and they've said that communications from leaders to teams and individuals will go out today. However, the company did highlight that they expect to continue hiring in key strategic areas. Now, earlier reports stated that about 30,000 layoffs are anticipated in the company, affecting 10% of Amazon's workforce. And now the company has come out in a blog post stating that 14,000 confirmed job cuts are going to be undertaken within Amazon. Now, the Senior Vice President of People Experience and Technology at Amazon has said that they will identify opportunities to remove layers, increase ownership, and realize these efficiency gains. And she's also said that this generation of AI is the most transformative technology we've seen since the internet, which feeds into the speculation or the thought that it is the AI or the realized gains from the use of AI that is leading to redundancies in the current workforce in Amazon, and that is why these job cuts are being undertaken. They've also said that they will be shifting resources to ensure that they're investing in their biggest bets, and they need to be more organized. They need to be organized more leanly, with fewer layers and more ownership. That's the word coming in from the Amazon management. In fact, they've also announced some support for the impacted employees, saying that companies is going to offer employees 90 days to look for a new role internally, and that recruiting teams will prioritize internal candidates. And additionally, they will be offering severance pay, outplacement services, and health insurance benefits to those affected in this round of job cuts.
Thank you very much, Anjali, for putting that story into perspective. So, ladies and gentlemen, 90 days is what Amazon is going to give its employees who are going to lose their jobs to find a new job. Is that enough? And are these job cuts that are driven by AI transformation, is this just about corporate greed to corner more? Well, we're going to be discussing that and much more on tonight's show. And joining us to discuss these points and more, I'm now joined by Rajani Sinha. She's the Chief Economist at CareEdge Group. Also joining us on this broadcast is Shantanu Root, who's the founder and CEO of Team Lee's EdTech. Thank you very much, Shantanu and Rajni, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET. Now, let me come to you, Rajni, first. The expanse of these job losses, this seems pretty dire, given that it covers nearly 10% of the global corporate staff of Amazon. Is this a hint, perhaps, which could lead us to another depression of sorts? And what could this essentially mean for overall global economy? If you could put these developments into perspective, the kind of job losses that AI is going to lead, and how will that impact the global economy?
Firstly, I'll talk about the impact on Indian economy. So, in fact, what is happening in India's IT sector in terms of hiring and in terms of wage growth is concerning for the economy. And as we are all aware that IT is like the backbone of India's urban economy. A large part of urban population is employed in the IT sector. And here in the IT sector, the job situation has not been good. In fact, for the last couple of years, we had done a study of what is happening to the employee cost in the IT sector. And what we found is that in FY25, the employee cost, so we had looked at the sample of IT companies, and we found that the employee cost in the sample of companies had increased by only 5% in FY25, as against average of around 15% in the previous 3 years, from FY19 to 23. As against 15% growth, then annual growth, we just saw a growth of 5% in FY25. So that's concerning. And the lower growth in employee cost is both because of lower growth in wages and also because of lower hiring. In fact, if you look at a set of, you also looked at a set of major tech companies, and we looked at the headcount growth that has been happening there. And what we found is that in FY25, the headcount growth was flat. And this is after a contraction that we had seen in FY24. So basically, the story on IT hiring and IT sector wage growth has been grim for the last few years. And that is concerning because, like I said, a large part of India's workforce is employed in the IT sector. And like you mentioned, not just India, globally, economies are struggling with the employment situation. And as we are seeing more and more, global economies are getting protectionist. And one big reason for that is because of lack of job opportunities in their respective economies. So yes, with this AI transformation that we are seeing all around us, while this is going to add to productivity, but at the same time, it's going to be very challenging in terms of what happens to job creation. And this is specifically more concerning for a very labor-intensive country like India. So yes, we need to brace ourselves and prepare for how this segment is going to cope with AI revolution and what's going to be the impact of that on our job scenario.
Absolutely. Rajni, it's a very fascinating point that you made there. The fact that, this is going to affect India's urban middle class that is heavily dependent on the IT sector for jobs as well. And we'll come to that. But before that, let's talk about Amazon and the overall picture as far as the job market in the tech industry is concerned. Shantanu, Amazon's, of course, cutting 14,000 corporate jobs now. Over 90,000 tech jobs have already been cut in 2025 globally across numerous firms. Now, the big question, Shantanu, let's cut straight to the chase here. Has AI become a convenient excuse, or are companies now truly recalibrating their workforce? They've somehow figured a formula to be more efficient.
So, Ashish, I'm not sure why are we being surprised today. Right? We have been talking about this AI-led transformation of the entire employment industry for the last so many quarters already. Today, that's already started showing up its results today, right? So we already knew that several job roles will start getting erased as AI becomes more powerful, more intelligent, and become mainstream in multiple businesses. And actually, that started happening faster than we could have thought about. So in many industries, this is, I think, in my opinion, the changes that you're seeing at Amazon is just the tip of the iceberg. You'll start seeing this in many industries across different countries. You'll start seeing this in many different job roles because as industries, organization, and the world of work goes through this transformation, it's very difficult to predict today that what will change. The most cliched statement would be that new job roles will get created. But I'm sure that none of us understand that which job roles will get created. We could, in case I need to, make some sort of prediction, it will have the efficacy of an astrologer or a soothsayer. But then possibly not many CEOs today are aware of the changes and the speed of this change and the impact of this changes on businesses, on their economies, even on societies. I think the unbridled growth of AI possibly could have catastrophic effect on employment for sure in across multiple industries. You talked about IT industry, tech industry. I think tech industry is really going through a massive transformation today. It's not just the facade of AI which they're wearing on front of their faces. I think their customers today, their businesses that they used to serve are going through a massive transformation. The customers' asks and the demands are changing today. They are more becoming outcome driven, lower cost, faster delivery, more precise delivery, business alignment, outcome driven. I think some of these things are driving the changes that we are seeing in the tech world. And I think this is not a passing shower. This is climate change for the world of tech.
Right, Shantanu, I have a follow-up question to that, and you put that the challenge that of course companies and employees are facing very well into perspective. But these job cuts that we're essentially seeing, are they just about employees not being able to meet that skilling gap, or is this a story of corporate greed? Given that Amazon globally is doing very well.
Sumita, I'm not too sure whether we should call it capital greed. It's capitalism at its peak for sure. Organizations need to figure out their own survival strategy at this point in time. We have been talking for quite some time that people and employees will need to make sure that they are just not being productive, they're also being resilient to these changes. We have been talking about the need of upskilling, reskilling, new skilling for each one of us to become AI literate, to be able to use AI or assistant to improve our own productivity and our resilience. We have been talking about how employees in the future will need to become more resilient from a problem-solving perspective, more adaptive to changes, and more they need to be very high on these type of skill sets. People who do not showcase these skill sets to an organization will start losing relevance. This 15,000 people does not necessarily mean that Amazon is just going to reduce its overall workforce. It says that it's still going to hire people because there are seasonal hiring going on, but the type of people that Amazon is going to hire are going to be different from the people who are going to get laid off. I think this is the time, it's an awakening call for all of us to figure out that we will need to continuously upskill ourselves to ensure that we remain relevant, our skill set remain relevant for the employers that we work for.
Absolutely. The larger picture, of course, stays into context. But Rajani, you were making a very interesting point, and that was the first line. When it comes to your reply as well, you spoke about a particular section of the society in India being very dependent on these tech jobs, and something affecting them globally as well will have a major effect in India as well. Now, the big question, of course, that brings us to the question that if global tech demand slows and India's IT hiring also flattens, then what really happens to this urban middle class that you're talking about that rides on tech salaries? Could a global tech squeeze also eventually start hurting India's consumption story?
So firstly, I would like to highlight the fact that globally, with whatever has been happening around, all the geopolitical and the other global risks that we are seeing around us, luckily for us, the global service trade has been relatively less impacted compared to global goods export. So while global goods trade has been quite severely impacted by the turmoil that we are seeing around us, global services trade has continued to record decent growth. So that's a savior for India, given that we are big in the service sector exports, and overall in global services exports, we enjoy a share of around 4% or so. So that comes as a savior. But having said that, given the slowdown that we are seeing globally, given the uncertainties that we are seeing globally, yes, there would be some impact on global services trade, and that would have an impact on India too. The important point to note for India is that, all these years in the past, we have benefited in a big way by having this large STEM population. And that's something which has given us an edge in the ITS sector. But given this AI revolution, and given that this revolution is happening so fast, like my previous speaker Shantanu mentioned, this reskilling, we really need to up the game there. And also what is very important is that we need to focus, Indian companies need to focus on R&D. That is where we are very low. Because only if we start focusing on R&D will we be able to move up the value chain. Because this race for AI supremacy is really gaining traction. And if we get left behind, then it will result in, us losing out on a very, very big pie. And it's important that we don't, because so far we have enjoyed this advantage of having an edge in the ITS sector. But yes, having said that, given that, right now the situation doesn't look too
Right, and
good,
we'll
and
have
we
to
will
see what really
also
happens to all of those outsourcing jobs. Will robots take over? Will AI take over, Rajni? That essentially is what we'll have to see. But let me come to you, Shantanu. Now, we see many travel apps, quick commerce apps in India have almost eliminated all of customer support. And now updates, if you see, or chatbots essentially are powered by AI. So aren't these companies essentially taking customers for a ride in the name of AI?
Sumita, you may be right actually, and some of us who have experienced interacting with this chatbot, so frustrating that is. At times, organizations in initial phases has possibly overdone this particular step because the element of empathy, the element of personalization is missing when you talk to a chatbot, right? When I get very frustrated talking to that Amazon chatbot when I really have a problem, I need a human to hear me out, understand my problem is, and not give me those repetitive, prefixed answers that this chatbots possibly are used to be giving. I think that's being overdone at this point in time. But as we go forward, as we start maturing, I think some of these things will start stabilization. The future doesn't belong to a man or a machine. The future belongs to a man with a machine. I think that's the way the world is going to move towards.
Absolutely. In fact, continuing on that point, Rajni was also very interestingly mentioning the fact that, we need to shift our focus away from just talking about job losses. We need to focus on reskilling as well. Now, Rajni, with, of course, the transition happening in terms of tech jobs, tech roles around the world, the onus also, in a way, shifts towards the government, also the industries as well. To accelerate reskilling, adapt education. They are accelerating the way they adapt technology, but why not have the same sort of a pace when it comes to reskilling, or even, design some sort of a safety net so that their loyal employees are not really affected? Do you think the fact that a lot of governments, a lot of companies are being reactive rather than proactive, it's actually ultimately hurting the employees?
So I feel as far as skilling is concerned, and as far as initiatives from the government is concerned on the skilling front, there is a lot that's already happening. But I think what's also important is that the private sector, the corporates also focus on skilling. And like I said, they focus on moving up the value chain. Right now, we were in a segment of IT, ITS sector, which with the kind of population we have, it was helping us. But if we need to, the question is not if we need to move up the value chain. And if that's something which we want, then like I mentioned earlier, the private sector needs to focus more on R&D because the technology sector is moving very fast. If we do not invest in R&D, we'll get left behind. And here I would again like to emphasize that if we look at the R&D expenditure in India, while the government is still spending, the private sector's focus and spending on R&D is very low. So that's something where the private sector needs to really gear up.
Right. So private sector definitely needs to do more so far as these skilling and reskilling initiatives are concerned. Of course, individuals themselves are also doing, but we'll have to see how much can the private sector also contribute to that. But Rajani, let's talk about the impact of these job losses or job replacements. I mean, this is going to have a dehumanizing impact on humans as well and fundamentally alter our relationship with each other. Are we looking at serious societal ramifications and hence ramifications for governments and governance as well, with respect to the developments that we're seeing around AI?
Yes, definitely. We are already concerned about the growth in household income because if hiring and the job situation is adverse, that does have an impact on household income, which eventually will also have an impact on household consumption and all other parameters as to what happens to the investment scenario in the economy and what happens to overall growth. So yes, it is very important. And more so, another important point to note is that we are concerned about household income at this point in time. And at the same time, household debt has been increasing. As we are all aware that increasingly, household sector is borrowing and spending. So their leveraging is increasing. There is uncertainty about their household income, which definitely, if you put these things together, it doesn't look very good. And that would probably explain why consumer sentiments are still weak in the economy. If we look at RBI household survey, which shows what's happening to consumer sentiments, it still remains in the negative territory. And I think a big reason for that is the job situation, the wage growth situation, and overall household income situation. And right now we are talking about AI and the impact. Also keep in mind at the same time, we have this concern around what's going to happen to our exports, given the high reciprocal tariff by US, and exports, or most of our sectors are very labor intensive. So if exports get impacted of textiles, leather, gems and jewelry, that will also have an impact on employment situation in these sectors.
Absolutely. Rajani, it's of course, very volatile situation. Like you rightly said, we'll of course have to see how it pans out. But Shantanu, the bigger question, of course, here is what's the end game? Because now you have AI, have technology reaching a certain level. You see 14,000 jobs being lost, 90,000 throughout the year. A couple of years down the line, it's going to advance even further. Besides your customer support jobs being lost to AI, like Sumita pointed out, you also will have a lot of software engineers also losing their jobs as well. A couple of years more down the line, it will advance to a much higher levels of jobs as well. So what's the end game here? How do we end this loop, and how do companies as well as employees make sure that regardless of how far technology is going, they at least stay in the game and at least are able to contribute without actually losing their job?
So Ashish, Rajani actually spoke very well on that case, right? So the impact of deglobalization that we are all staring at, the impact of geopolitical uncertainty that we are all staring at, the impact of technological disruptions that we are all staring at. I think all of these things are going to have a lasting impact on people's lives, economies, and societies. The only way to weather all these changes, impact of changes, remains in people reskilling and upskilling themselves to this new world, of work, new world of organizations. Organizations are changing. They're all transitioning at this point. They're all in a transitioning phase. In this new world, we also believe that everything is not very bad in that case. There are new job roles which are emerging for sure. People who can work with data, people who can work with security, people who can work with ethics. There are different type of job roles which will emerge in this new world of work. It's important, since we can't actually predict the future, we must ensure that we are making ourselves worthy of it by ensuring that we continuously upskill ourselves. In the earlier days, possibly a BTech degree, MTech degree was enough. Possibly you could have added an MBA degree. But in tomorrow's world, possibly a continuous lifelong learning is actually a reality. People will need to invest in themselves and continuously invest in themselves. One of the recent studies that Team Lead ZTech conducted some time back, here Sumita and Ashish, I'd like to mention that we are surprised to find that of the different upskilling initiatives that are happening in India currently, about 85% of that is being funded by employees themselves through their own funding. Only 15% of the employees get some sort of support from their employers. I think the private sector, the employer sector, need to wake up to this reality and possibly come forward, helping employees also in their reskilling game, because ultimately, if employees are reskilling and upskilling, employers and organizations have a lot to benefit from. I think that their contribution also have to go up as we transition to this new world.
Absolutely, Shantanu. And again, it remains to be seen how do these advancements in technology can ultimately benefit the common citizens and not just billionaires. But, when we talk about this uncertainty around household income and, of course, consumption dipping and eventually it having an impact on the economy, we have to also address that point about the wage gap that is going to get widened even further. What can governments do? How can they step in to ensure that gap does not widen?
So I think the government
Shantanu,
is also
if you could answer
trying.
that.
Yeah, the government is also putting in multiple different efforts in this particular space, Sumita. I think government has started understanding the impact of it a couple of years back. NEP 2020 possibly creates the right conditions for creating a spontaneous combustion without putting the industry on fire. It creates the right conditions where formal education blends with skilling to create people who are more employable. It talks about vocationalization of education. It talks about nuggetizing education. It creating a system where there is modularity of education there. It creates a situation where there is equivalence between in the class learning, online learning, on the job learning. So I think it creates the right type of conditions where possibly India will be at the forefront of this revolution as we start implementing this new vision document of NEP 2020. Government is trying to, the new initiative that you must have seen from Government of India talks about how they need to blend some sort of an on-the-job learning through internships and apprenticeships with formal education to ensure that the kids who are coming out of the Indian education system are just not educated but also skilled. I think some of these initiatives that the government is making today is creating a condition possibly where the youth of tomorrow will find their relevance in this new world of work.
Shantanu, Ruj and Rajani Sinha, appreciate you joining us here. Of course, it's a discussion that will continue to crop up every now and then as we see more technology taking over jobs, roles as well. Reskilling also becomes a major issue, not just in terms of the individuals, but also for the industry as a whole. Really appreciate you joining us on the broadcast here with your insights on that. And viewers, of course, as we continue to get you all the details about what's happening, not just in India, but around the world, the ninth edition of the